welcome and thank you everyone for attending Cocktails and Conversation with Dr. Beth Mcneil. Dr. Mcneil received her PhD in Human Sciences Leadership Studies focus at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She is currently the Dean of Libraries, Esther Ellis Norton Professor of Library Science. Thank you. Library Science, Purdue University. Dr. Mcneil will present Libraries Today, Much More Than Books, which addresses the evolving nature of libraries in general and Purdue Libraries in particular. She will discuss how today's libraries offer a wide range of resources and spaces for research, study, collaboration, and creativity, and how the Purdue Library System was recently renamed to better describe the enhanced academic contributions of its faculty. Without further ado, let me present Dr. Beth Mcneil.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria, for that kind introduction, and Stephanie for the technical help earlier. And thank you to everybody who did the poll, and no one checked Google, why do I need a library? So I feel like my work here is done. That is awesome. Thank you. Google is not the answer. If that's the message you take away tonight, that would be great. But I see many friendly faces and names, including library supporters. I see some library staff, welcome library staff, and some other friends from around campus, and really just people who love Purdue. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I will go ahead and get started. And just to say, we're the libraries. There's some stats on the side of the screen there. The bottom line is we are more than books, and I'll talk more than that, but we're also, for many of you alums, who have, maybe it's been a while since you were on campus, although I was delighted to see Potter Library, Pharmacy Library, Hissey Library, Library and Stewart Center. So many of you clearly have some memories. I hope they're fond memories of your time in our Purdue Library. But we still, at this point in time, have 6 subject-oriented libraries, the Hicks Undergraduate Library, and then also Archives and Special Collections, which is a separate office or unit that's housed on the 4th floor of the Hissey Library. And Hissey would be Humanities, Social Sciences, and Education. We're also organizationally the Office of Undergraduate Research, the Purdue University Press, which is a small publisher of university press titles, and then the University Copyright Office are part of the libraries, or at least they're strategic partners of ours. The School of Information Studies, which I'll talk about in just a minute, is a title change at a minimum from a couple of years ago, actually before I arrived at Purdue as Dean. Provost Ackridge suggested with the library's faculty a name change to better reflect the work that we do. So I'm going to keep going and talk a little bit about that. I hope you'll have questions about this. Our courses are developing. At this point in the spring semester, we have really been trying to refine the courses that we're offering, not the courses themselves, but in fact, a curriculum, if you will. We don't have a major. Getting a major is a complicated and time-consuming process, and it may not be the right thing for Purdue to have an information studies major at this point in time, but we are offering certificates, and we have 3 at this point, an undergraduate and a graduate certificate in digital humanities, which is co-led by the College of Liberal Arts, and then also a graduate certificate in geographic information sciences. Both of these are sort of putting your toes in the water, maybe, of offering a programmatic effort at Purdue. The GIS certificate is really taking off. Students have already achieved it based on courses they took this past year. And in December, the first couple of students who graduated also had some of our certificates. So we were pretty pleased about that. We also still, for those of, and I know there are friendly faces in the crowd who are librarians, school media specialists, and they kind of know what we do, you do as alums. We also still do the traditional work of instruction in library use, if you will, information literacy. And those are important components still for our faculty and our librarians. I mentioned the Office of Undergraduate Research, which is it's a nice fit with the work that we do. CURE on my screen, CURE stands for Course Integrated Undergraduate Research Experiences, where a faculty member can participate in some training to be able to incorporate a research project within a course, which enables more students to have a true undergraduate research experience. So it's one thing we're trying to ramp up a little bit more. And then we are part of the impact program. Our library faculty members and some staff participate as part of a triad with instructional designers and IT staff to help faculty transform their courses. This is probably, gosh, an 8 or 10-year-old old program now. It's very successful. And the number of courses that have been transformed and the instructors who have participated just grows and grows every year. Our Booker Chair in Information Literacy, Dr. Clarence Maybe is a key leader in the impact program, and we're delighted to be part of that. So in libraries, as some of you know, our roles are a little different. We have to bring the foundational aspects of library science to it. And at the same time at Purdue, we have library faculty status. So teaching, research, and service. And the roles that we play there were part of why Provost Ackridge considered the name change. I like to think of it as an addition to explaining our roles on campus just a little bit better. In addition to, the traditional library role, the teaching that we do, I like to think we're doing things. That's our strategic plan. We do things. I don't really mean that, but we do have 6 major goal areas, and they are where you might expect them to be. Optimizing services, both virtual and in person, to make our spaces, our systems, our services more responsive to user needs. Advancing sustainable scholarship, and I will talk more about this later. This is a big role for us in the libraries, and it's an important one for us to help lead on campus. And it has to do with really trying to harness the ever-escalating prices of scholarly journals, but at the same time work with campus faculty to learn about new ways of publishing, new methods for sharing with the world Purdue's expertise, which is a role we take very seriously to make that happen. We also are, as a goal, really trying to think about our curriculum. This is important. The school aspect of our name is still new. 3 years is not very long in the scheme of this kind of work. So we're working there. Like other areas of Purdue, we're working hard on diversity, equity, and inclusion in both our workforce, our staff and faculty in the libraries, but also the resources that we provide to campus. And then trying to develop a diverse workforce. We have the privilege, the good luck, if you will, to be part of one of the campus cluster hires right now in public health, where we're looking for an information specialist to focus on public health issues. I think one of ours actually was part of the Purdue Women Network last fall and presented on her interesting research, but we're trying to hire an additional one. We actually, we're a small college, if you will, but we have done a good job over the years in the overarching research library community with developing and hiring and retaining a more diverse workforce. I'm very actually proud of the work in that area. And then our 6th goal, I hope in the future doesn't have to be a goal, but our libraries and School of Information Studies haven't always been good about telling our story. And we lost a little bit of ground in the last 4 or 5 years with doing that, both on our campus, nationally and internationally. We have had a strong international reputation for information literacy for a long time. And so I decided a goal was really around visibility. And I'm hopeful that we'll make progress in the next 3 years on that. At the same time, more than books, that's kind of my catchphrase these days. Please understand, I think books are very important, no matter what format they come in, but we also do a lot more than that. The services we provide and the reach of our assistance. So the map on the screen is really one slice, a moment in time for individuals all over the world who are accessing Purdue faculty scholarship through our institutional repository, EPUBs. And then it's faculty who have retained the rights when they're publishing to make sure that their research is also included in the institutional repository so it can be made available to all freely around the world. We think of that as part of our land grant mission in the libraries to share as broadly as possible the products of Purdue scholarship. Of course, always with faculty permission. And then the chart in gold at the top is a little dated. I thought I had updated this slide, but I must have slid the wrong one in. For 2022, this latest year, we're up to 15,000 digital reference questions. So it has exploded. It exploded with COVID, as you might imagine, during those first 3 or 4 months when Purdue was closed, campuses were closed everywhere, and our libraries were closed. So we ramped up our digital reference service, and it has, well, it's just skyrocketed. We are very pleased to be able to offer that service to any Purdue faculty, staff, and actually other people who email us. And our hours have expanded too. I discussed sustainable scholarship when I mentioned our goals for this year. So Purdue, like all of our Big Ten colleagues and actually research universities across the universe, well, maybe the universe, certainly the United States, have struggled for years with the spiraling and unsustainable nature of journal publishers and the prices that they charge large research universities. Last year, we took a bold move and we decided we can't subscribe to everything one particular large publisher publishes, which had been the way for the last 10 years. It's easier, frankly, to just say, we'll take everything you have and pay you millions of dollars. It's easier on staff. It also makes things more accessible. But we took a hard look with faculty input, and we were able to cut a major bill for this current year for subscriptions from one publisher by $1.5 million. Since then, we have been able to order the articles that anyone needs that we cut for less than $100,000. So clearly it was a savings that at this point in time was worthwhile. We'll have to see how that plays out. We also take our Purdue West Lafayette role seriously, and we try to include Purdue Northwest and Purdue with Fort Wayne in any of the deals that we make with publishers as often as we can with no cost to the smaller schools. But sometimes publishers aren't so eager to do that. So we try to find ways to make it clear. And on this slide, when you get past the hard and fast details, I like to talk about open science, which is really making the scholarly publishing system that we have in place for the last 50, 60, 70 years, since about the 1950s, to transform it, to make research no longer behind a firewall, so that individuals all over the world can benefit from what Purdue scholars and others are writing and publishing, including data for, to make it freely available. The Libraries Dean's Advisory Council has helped us with this goal, because just because it's freely available to those around the world doesn't mean it's free. So our Dean's Advisory Council last fall, with no urging from me, started a fund for the libraries to try to move the open scholarship cycle a little farther at Purdue. I believe we're the only one in the Big Ten to have such a fund and have such support, so that's tremendous. I want to talk about the Purdue fully residential experience, because this is close to my heart. It's also a role that we need to play. But what you're seeing on the screen, a couple of additional services we offer. We worked with the College of Liberal Arts last year to redesign a reading room, really around the Cornerstone program, which is an important Purdue initiative. 3D printing lab is just one of our services that undergraduate students are particularly interested in. But that not so pretty photo in the corner is from last Thursday, when architects were on campus helping us assess student usage. And so I'm happy to share slides later, and this one is just particularly telling, but I thought as alums and friends, you might be interested to the question of how often do you visit a library? We posted this in 4 places on campus. 2 of them were far away from any of our library facilities. One was outside the Humanities and Social Science Education Library, and the other one was inside the Wilmeth Active Learning Center, which is technically a library, but kind of doesn't look like one. And I hope that you can see that that more students than any other group chose that they visit a library 4 to 5 times a week. So that's I think a pretty strong sign of students at Purdue wanting to have the library experience, even though we know many of them never take a print book off a shelf. We know this. Grad students maybe take some, faculty do too, but just students at Purdue across campus indicated that they come to the library 4 to 5 times a week. And only one of them said it's because he works there. But at any rate, it's fine for him to come too. I've just lost my mouse, so I can't, there we go. But related to that, we have a master plan underway, which is like the colleges on campus do these master plans to think about space needs for the next 10 years or 20 years. we're really looking at expanding our archives and special collections because it doesn't have enough space for growth. We're looking at updating and making more and better quality, so quality and quantity, student, group, and individual study spaces. Our surveys and other interviews suggest that students are seeking quiet space at Purdue more often than they're seeking group spaces, at least from what the library provides, which I think is interesting. We certainly see a lot of group work, but when we ask them what they'd really like, they really want individual quiet space. And we're also looking at branding our physical and virtual spaces, which does kind of make sense. If you go back to my visibility goal issue, we are not good at making our libraries seem to be all one system. Sometimes students are confused by libraries if they're inside another building. They don't necessarily realize that they exist. I'm going to check my time. I have to move a little quicker. I get excited when I talk about the libraries and everything we're doing. The master plan started last fall, and it will conclude this summer with a report with recommendations to campus leaders. All right, so these are some of the program drivers. I mentioned archives and special collections right there at the top. Of course, the libraries is after the persistent pursuit of innovation. We want to tie everything we do into what the university wants. We also need expanded exhibit space. We're calling it a knowledge gallery, the opportunity to share our special collections in a bigger space, but also in a more prominent space. You would be surprised at the, one of the quiz questions had to do with whether or not you came to see the Apollo, 50-year Apollo exhibit. That exhibit was so popular with K through 12, with families, with Purdue guests, with alums, with students who might want to come here, that we actually had complaints that it was too crowded. That doesn't happen a lot to us. So we need better space to tell Purdue's story. And in libraries, classrooms are a nice component, but we feel like we blur the formal and social learning that is so important to students on campus. The seats that you'll see listed there, we've got about 2,800 seats at Purdue. Studies from the mid-90s, the mid-2000s, and even more recently, there's some benchmarking. We're a little low on seats for students in our libraries and on campus. Somehow our architects that we're working with have been managed to collect information about study seats everywhere on campus, and Purdue is still about 1,000 seats short, which is interesting. Looking ahead. Oh, and the master plan architects, they've done a whole lot of interviewing, intercept interviewing. We didn't do a survey because students are kind of over surveyed on campus, but we did the boards that I showed you in that other slide, 4 locations, 4 boards to collect dots just last week. So we're still kind of looking at that information, but I can tell you that the library that is most frequently used is either the Wilmeth Active Learning Center library, or the HISI library, or the Hicks library. They kind of come in close. We also know that students determine which library they use largely by location and convenience. So disciplinary areas matter a little bit, but in the electronic world, it's really more about convenience. We also know that students would love for a library out by the residence halls. I don't think that's quite in the campus planners plans, but that surfaced as the top request. And then I already showed you when I was bragging about students visiting 4 to 5 times a week, at least the ones who did the boards. Lots of work has gone in so far into where we are, but we're probably slightly more than halfway through the master plan process with more to come. These are some of the shared likes. These are not Purdue libraries, by the way. This is exercises that the architects use to show students pictures. And green and blue just had to do with green dots are library staff and blue dots are students, from just one example as an exercise. And then some site observation. Space type and activities in the spaces really matters. Individual carols are the most sought after and fill up the most quickly. Large study rooms, for example, in the Wilmeth Active Learning Center, they're classrooms daily, but in the evenings and weekends when classes aren't in session, they could be study rooms. They're very large rooms in many cases, but if one small group goes in or 2 people, other students don't feel comfortable going in and using that space too. Some of that's about acoustics, some it's about sight lines, but we're studying that. We also know that the 50 mobile whiteboards we purchased this year are helping to define space, but also a lot of pharmacy, nursing, and other life science related students are using them for all kinds of really interesting information. I like to take photos of the boards when I come in the morning just to see what's been going on the night before, and it's quite interesting. Some veterinary medicine students must have been in the humanities library over the weekend because they had drawn little cows and sheep, and then they had all sorts of information, facts about each of them on the whiteboards. Natural light is super important. That makes sense. We have a couple of libraries where that's possible, but most of our libraries are older from the days when book stacks didn't like light coming in. It was better to not have windows. So we're going to need to work on that. And then really in the blue box are some things that we really need to think about, and we're working with our architects to think about them. Conference rooms across campus don't have consistent technology. I think that's something campus leaders and IT are working on. It's certainly something we want to be involved in. And then students really are observed. We can see them working at a 4-seat table, one person or two. So maybe it's important to have a bigger table with only 2 chairs. I don't know, things we're studying as we move forward through this study. This is also happening in other libraries with good, vibrant enrollment. Things are looking a little crowded. This is just a slide the architect shared with me about during busy times and other times, predominant seat usage. And you will see that one-person seats, single carrels, are incredibly popular. And as you get a larger table or a bench, they are not as well utilized by the people who could be sitting there, the numbers of people. And that even at Purdue, not all students carry around a laptop. So the spaces in our libraries where there's a computer access that they could maybe plug into their laptop and have 2 screens, or just use a computer, are still quite popular. I think that's been eye-opening for some of the campus architects who were thinking that perhaps labs were less used. They are used in our libraries. And just a couple more slides. If you're familiar, if you've been on campus in the last 4 or 5 years, the Thomas S. and Harvey D. Wilmeth Active Learning Center is an incredibly popular building, both for classes. Many instructors like to teach in there because of the active learning classroom possibility, but it's also a library building. So it came about because the former dean, Dr. James Mullins, really wanted a new combined science library so he could collapse 6 science libraries into one building. But campus was growing and that we really needed classroom space. So this is, I think, a really good example. Classrooms and libraries and study space, that's variety. Students really do like a variety of study space, but there's also a cafe in there. There's research assistants, we staff it, and campus IT staffs it. So it's sort of a perfect opportunity for students who want to come, want to find a quiet space, want to find a group study space, maybe in between a class that they're already there for, grab a snack, and just experience a study group or individual learning themselves to further their success, which is a big part of what we'd like to be a part of here at Purdue. So I've talked about many of our libraries without actually showing you pictures. That's also a big part of what the library master plan is about, helping us to rethink spaces, to update them, to better meet, at least in our physical facilities, the Purdue students' experience. Some faculty use the libraries, and we're happy to have them, but it's much, much more common for undergraduate students and then graduate students to actually come in to experience the physical library. Our website might as well be our main library because the website traffic exceeds the actual humans that walk into all of our libraries. We know that because of hits to the website, but also campus tracks Wi-Fi. So if you have a phone, and almost everybody does, and it's on, we know campus knows if you've entered one of the libraries. So it's a good way to keep track of who's using it, not who, because we care about privacy, but the number of people who might be using a space at any one time. I think there are many more things I wanted to say, but it looks like I am at the time that we agreed to. So I'll just close here and say thank you. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram if you'd like. It's largely library stuff and maybe dogs, but I'm happy to have more followers if you'd like. And anyone who's interested in knowing more about the library should certainly feel free to reach out to me, or I'll ask or answer. I'll try to ask questions. I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you again, everybody, for attending this evening. I hope Everybody loved your session, Beth. I really love. Thank you again for presenting. And we'll call it this evening. We'll see you next month for our next Cocktails and Conversation. Thank you, everyone.